One thing my friends know about me is how much I love pirates, but I will never forget the day I actually met a real one. I'll share that with you today in this episode. Back in 2011, my family and I went on an RV road trip, and it was a blast. One of my favorite locations that we landed in was the Florida Keys. And it just so happened one of the evenings there was mind blowing, absolutely incredible, a spiritual clearing that brought stuff up that just had me in awe. So we're down in the Florida Keys and we found a state park. It was a very simple campground where the campsites were lined up along the water. So your campsite literally had oceanfront property. You could park your RV and then step out of your RV and walk right into the water. It was incredible. The partitions between the campsites were really thick too. So there's a lot of shrubbery and fencing in between all the campsites. So once you pulled into your site, you felt very alone. You didn't feel like you were in one big campground. You felt like you were in your own little private slice of heaven on the beach. So we're there and kids are playing. It's the middle of the day. I'm sitting on the edge of the water, loving every minute of it. And my guide shows up and says, I need you to do a land clearing. And I said, okay, just give me the instructions. So a land clearing for me is just following instruction. Where do you want me to send the energy out? What intent do you want me to put behind it? Perhaps what movement, what color, et cetera, for the light that I'm going to send. So it's almost like dousing an area full of light with particular intention to shift the energy. And that's what he wanted me to do. So he said, I don't recall to this day how far out it was, but it was at least a mile radius around me, maybe somewhere closer to 2 to 3 miles around me. And once he gave me that image of where he wanted the energy to be cleared, I went ahead and I filled up that space in my mind. And in my mind, I, filled up that whole area with white light. And I asked him, what intent do you want me to put into this? And he said, very specific words, put the intent of community, the intent of coming together, the intent of fighting, no longer, fighting and lifting each other up and loving each other. So while my brain wanted to ask questions like, what's going on in this area, that there's a lot of fighting that we need to, hopefully help slow that down. But I didn't let that left brain go quiet, did the work, sent out the energy and the intent, saw it going out on, just waves of white light. And then it adjusted the energy. And I only know that because my guide said, okay, it's done. Thank you for doing the work. I said, absolutely. Thinking I was done, I sat back down in my lawn chair, toes totally in the sand. And off to my right, I saw a male spirit start to take form. And then he kept getting stronger visually to the point where he was almost 70, 80% solid. Still had that transparency that I see in spirits, but he was very solid. And he turned, and as he was turning, I remember he looked at me, I looked at him. So we both had awareness that each other was aware of each other. And he looked at me again and he said, I need you to help her. Now, I instantly knew that this man was stuck because he was worried, he was concerned, and spirits that are in the in-between that have not crossed over yet, they're still in a linear time format, and you need that linear time to have fear or worry. So he was expressing fear or worry right out of the gate and saying, I need you to help her. So I knew he was stuck. So I opened up a conversation with him to try to figure out what was going on to help him cross over. Still didn't know who her was. He came a little bit closer. When he came closer, I just recognized that he was very shabby. His clothes looked very purposeful, but kind of ragged and worn. That'd probably be the best word for it, worn. He's just a heavy beard and, kind of, frazzled hair. And I think he knew that I was looking at his appearance because he stopped for a minute and he said, I was a pirate. And I looked at him and my my naive brain instantly went, no, you weren't. That's not what pirates look like. And then I went, wait a minute. My brain equates pirates with Disney pirates, not actual pirates. I let my mind go all the way through that. And when I looked at him again, I went, yeah, you were. I mean, the coat and, like I said, very worn, but very purposeful clothing. And I just remember thinking, you don't look anything like a Disney pirate. This is actually kind of interesting. But then he started again and he said, I need you to help her. I said, oh, absolutely. Who is she? And he pointed away from the beach, like out toward the water. And I knew that I didn't know who she was yet, but she was out there. And I said, you're going to need to help me connect with her. And he said, she just keeps staying away from me. And I said, who is she? And he said, I loved her, but I hurt her. And I said, okay. And I said, can you tell me more? Can you tell? And so the story really unfolded. This is really how he explained it to me. He said, she was on my ship. I wouldn't let her off and I hurt her, but I loved her and I wanted to be with her. And I said, okay. And then you passed. And he said, yeah. And I waited for her. I said, okay. And when she passed, he grabbed onto her again. And then he realized he's doing the exact same thing after death that he was doing in life. He was holding her and not letting her go. Now, this was how it was described to me from him. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, you kidnapped a woman, kept her on your ship, and because you loved her. Now that's not love, right? But that's the facts. That's what happened. He's like, yes. You just need to help her. And I realized that this pirate, not the greatest guy, wouldn't do very well in today's society. He learned something, or at some point understood, what he was doing wrong. And that even after dying, he still did the same thing. So instead of crossing over himself, because he still wanted to be with her, he stayed in the in-between waiting for her. And then when she passed in a completely different situation, then he held on to her again. And now he's figured it out and he realizes this isn't good. And the only thing that he can do is get help for her. So I gave him 1 point out of 10 for at least wanting to help her. I say that jokingly, but at this point he had been there long enough. And I think he had gotten close enough to crossing over that he started to understand his ways and the things that he had done. So once this was all explained, and I remember when I reiterated it back to him, I saw her energy start to come closer, almost as if she could feel what was coming off of me, honestly, was this sort of female protective vibe. Because that's what I was honestly feeling when he was explaining this to me. You don't hear a story like that and go, oh, well, shucks, that's not great. For me, I felt like, oh no, I really need to help her. And she came closer and she stayed back a little bit. And I asked the pirate, I said, I need you to stand back. And he said, okay. She came closer. Once we were able to sort of connect our energies, she instantly crossed over. It was almost like I held the door open for her just by being there, just by being present. And then he came back and he said, thank you. And then he crossed over. It was very clear he could have crossed over at any point that he wanted to. So the small amount of points that I give him is he actually stayed. He could have crossed, but he stayed, thinking this is how I help undo what I did wrong. So she's now crossed over. He's crossed over. I'm sitting back in my chair thinking about pirates because I love pirates and how interesting that experience was. And then went into the RV, had some dinner, thought everything was done, and it so wasn't. My youngest son and I decided to stay that night in the RV, sleep in the RV. And my husband and my older son decided to take the tent and put the tent up between the RV and the ocean and sleep in the tent at night. Come on, how fantastic is that? Well, the tent's it was a 12 by 12 tent, so it was huge. And we all settled down for the night, fast asleep, and I hear a pounding on the RV door. And it's the middle of the night. And I'm hearing this pounding, and I wake up and I can hear my older son yelling, Mom, I need you to come help. So I bust open the door and the door slams open. We are in winds that I could not have expected. My first thought was hurricane or, tropical storm. Something's coming through here. We're in danger. My husband is literally in the tent, laying on the ground, arms out, legs out, because it's the only thing that was going to stop the tent from taking off in the wind. And my son and I run over there, grab the tent. My husband gets out of the tent, and the three of us are holding on to this 12 by 12 tent that is flying up in the air like a kite in this wind. The wind was so intense. And we walked the tent over to the van and shoved it into the van, shut the door. We all ran into the RV, took a deep breath, and I went into mom mode. I went into, okay, I'm on the Florida Keys with my two babies. There is 40, 50-mile-an-hour winds coming through here. You can barely stand up out there. Something's wrong. I grab my cell phone. I've got service. I look at the Weather Channel. The Weather Channel says the winds are at 7 miles an hour. And we're in the location we were at. And I was like, no, they're not. This windstorm is really bad. Looked at a different Weather Channel, 7 miles an hour. Looked at a third one, 7 miles an hour. Finally reached out for my guide and said, and Big Dog was with me and Peter was with me. And I said to them, what's going on? Do I need to get my family out of here? Do we need to evacuate? And they said, no, it's just the clearing you did earlier. Mother Earth is finishing up the last bits of it. And I remember I was having this conversation in my mind with my guides. My family's all sitting there looking at me like, what are you finding out on your phone? And now I have to tell my family, it's completely fine. It was just the spiritual clearing. There's like wind coming through to finish off something or do something. And I looked at my phone. I told them the truth. This is what it is. I did a clearing earlier and there's just some wind coming through to wash out the last remnants of it. And the boys were like, can we go outside then? And I said, sure. And we went outside. The wind was so strong that you had to yell to hear each other. And I actually have this really adorable video of my younger son. He took a heavy twin-size blanket and brought it outside. He stepped up onto the picnic table and stood on top of the picnic table, tied the blanket around his neck like he was Superman, and the wind was kicking that blanket straight back. And he was yelling, I'm a superhero. And I got some of it on film because now we're having fun. And then it started to calm and we got into the RV and we relaxed and the wind calmed even more and we all went back to bed. The next morning, sat down in the sand, took a deep breath, thought to myself for a moment, dude, you got to see a pirate. And that was really cool. But then felt an overwhelming feeling of awe at the power of the energy in between and what Mother Earth is so capable of. Also, I had a really deep moment of gratitude to be able to help two souls that needed to go home. Now, in life, it wasn't a perfect dance between the two of them. Sounds like it was actually very horrible. But in death, they still cared enough to hold their space and be able to find help. That really warmed my heart, and it reminded me that ghosts are people too.
This podcast is brought to you by the SAGE Method, the most comprehensive and down-to-earth intuitive development training available. Is this your year? Is it finally your time to increase your intuition, bring in more abundance, and experience the bliss you deserve? If yes, then join thousands of students across the world for a 7-week journey to uncover your natural, beautiful, and strong intuition. Visit us at thesagemethod.com for more information.